I wanted to talk this week about a lesson I got speaking to a really top acting coach from LA. There were a few things that she was saying that just reiterated what we already talk about in here, but I think it was really good to hear it from someone of her caliber, working with people at that kind of level. The thing that we talked a lot about, that for her it's all about, is the importance of script analysis. One of the things that she was saying was that actors at that level, the level at which she's coaching, demand this kind of work, and this is the kind of work that they're doing that elevates their work to the level that has them be as successful as they are. One of the things that we talked a lot about, and I thought this was so interesting, was the importance of theme. So, as a writer-director, one of the things that we always talk about when we are writing a script, when we're developing a script, when we're directing a film, is what's the theme of the story that we're telling? What's the theme of the movie? What is a theme? It's what the movie's about. The theme is the central idea of the movie. The theme is the message that the storytellers are trying to convey to the audience by telling this story. It's what the film is really about. And sometimes when I'm working with student writers, when I was teaching at Afters, for example, I might read like a script that had a really cool premise, and maybe even the way they were planning to execute would be really amazing and awesome. But if I couldn't tell what the theme was, as I'd say to them, you don't yet have a movie. I don't care. The audience don't care when the theme isn't clear. We care about films that are telling us something, that are teaching us something, that are revealing something about what it means to be alive, what it means to be human, what it is to get knocked down and manage to stand back up again and keep going. There's an argument that is being made by the filmmakers, and they are coming down on one side or the other of that argument. Themes deal with, as I said, themes deal with what it means to be alive, themes deal with what it means to be human, themes deal with questions of right or wrong, or morality. Any good fairy tale has a theme, doesn't it? What's the theme of The Boy Who Cried Wolf? Don't lie. You lie too many times, people stop believing you. And so when you tell the truth, it won't make any difference. That's why these stories resonate. Not just because because they're cool, or because they're fish, or because it's set in space, or there are kings and queens and princes and princesses or whatever, or dragons, but because what the story is really about. I think it's really important for actors to also consider, what is the theme of the story you are telling? Because every choice you make is in service of that theme. Every choice the director makes is in service of the theme. Every choice the production designer makes is in the service of revealing that theme. If it's true for the writers, the directors, the production designers, the costume designers, and everybody else involved in making the film, it also is true for you guys as actors. What's the story we're telling here? What's it really about? And what function do you play in the telling of the story? What function does your character play in the telling of the story? Not just literally what is my role, but what does my role reveal about the theme? The reason why theme is important is because it gives you a sense of purpose as an actor. It makes what you're doing about something bigger than you. That it's not just about you. You have a really important function to play, a really important role to play in the telling of this story. And in the telling of the story, we are conveying a really important message that needs to be conveyed to an audience. if you can understand what that overarching theme is, and you begin to actually work in the service of revealing that theme, you start to get yourself out of the way. Most actors are too concerned with what? Themselves. We get too caught up in me, and we make it about us, and we make it about, am I getting it right? How do I look? All of that kind of stuff. The more we put our attention back on ourselves, the more self-conscious we become. If we can make what we're doing about something bigger than ourselves, then you start to rise to the occasion in ways that you can't even foresee. Because here's the thing, if you understand the theme, you understand what your character is doing in the story. You understand what role your character is playing. It's very easy sometimes for us to judge our characters. You know what I mean? And to think that they're terrible people. But even if you're playing the bad guy in a film, like we've talked about before, the bad guy never thinks they're the bad guy. They always have a justification and a logic for what they're doing. It's actually really important that you really understand that logic and to really argue that point of view. You're not going to service the story by pulling back or by kind of winking at the audience that you're not really that bad person. Do you know what I mean? You want to double down and be as terrible as you need to be in order to tell the story, in order to reveal the message. Like, start to think about, what is the message? What function do you play? Our job is to embody the hero's journey. Heroes are people who will subjugate themselves and their own wishes or desires or needs in the service of something bigger than themselves. They give over to a cause that's bigger than them. And as a result, they rise to the occasion. Those are the kinds of characters that many of us are called to play. If you're going to play those kinds of characters, then I would suggest that you also want to make the story bigger than you. You will begin to rise to the occasion in ways that you can't foresee. I sometimes use the example of Martin Luther King and his mountaintop speech. Actually, the last speech that Martin Luther King gave. And at the time, he was really sick. He had the flu, and he was in Memphis for a sanitation workers' strike. He'd been in prison. Selma had happened. He was exhausted. And on this particular day, he was unwell and he didn't feel like getting out of bed. And his people came to him and they said, "Dr. King, you got to come. If you don't speak, the people are going to riot." And so in spite of how he felt, because the cause was bigger than him, he pulled himself out of bed and he went to this church and he gave this speech. And I think it is like one of the most incredible examples, just one of the most powerful speeches I've ever heard. And especially knowing what came next. Dr. King stood up there and he said at the end of this speech, "I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But it doesn't really matter for me now because I've been to the mountaintop and I've seen the promised land. And I might not get there with you, but I know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. And so tonight, I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord." And he walked off that stage to his death. The following day, he was assassinated on his balcony of his motel in Memphis. Those were his last public words uttered. That's the hero. The cause was bigger than him. There was an agreement among white Americans that black people shouldn't have the right to vote, that they were somehow inferior to white. He spent his entire life and gave his life in order to change that agreement. Because really that's how society works, right? It's all made up of agreements. We agree, and therefore we give it reality. If you don't like something, change the agreement. And in his case, that's what he did. He worked to change the agreement. He was younger than I was when he died. As he spoke to in his speech, he had his own concerns. He had things that were important to him. He wanted to live a long life. But the cause gave him a way of being. It gave him action. It gave him character. And in service of that thing that was bigger than him, he rose to the occasion. Now, I'm not asking you guys to lay down your life for anything. You don't have to do anything like that. But what I am saying is that every time you get up to do a scene, there is an opportunity for that kind of service, to serve something bigger than you, to serve the story, to serve the message of the story, which is what's important. This is what this particular coach spends a lot of time talking about with her clients, that this is the kind of work that her clients demand, that this is the kind of work that they do that elevates them to this other level of success. It's all in the script. It all comes back to the script. It all comes back to the analysis. Now, I don't want you guys to think of script analysis as something that's really dry and boring. Like when you do script analysis well, it should make you feel excited. It should make you itch to get up and act. It should start to ignite that burn, like you just want to get the hell into the scene. You know what I mean? Not in order to show your homework, but because you understand the story that you're telling. And you understand your role in the story and your function as this character. It's exciting. You want to be chomping at the bit as a result of the analysis that you've done. I think that often actors skip over it. You know what I mean? And we kind of wing it. Another way to think about theme, I think I sort of said it earlier, another way to think about it is, what is the argument that is being made? What is the central dramatic argument of the story? And what side of the argument are you on? You're either there to make that argument or to encourage somebody in the making of that argument, or you're there to oppose the argument, to be the counter point of view. Make sense? It's kind of really that simple. Argue their logic. You don't have to try to get emotional. The emotion will come. Don't you guys get emotional when somebody doesn't agree with you and your point of view on things? You do. You're just trying to get your point across. Same for your character. They're just trying to get their point across. Somebody doesn't agree with them. They get emotional about it. They get frustrated. They get angry. They try all of these different ways to achieve their objective. But if you can just come back to that, then often that's really all you need to do in the scene. Cate Blanchett said when she played Jasmine in Blue Jasmine, she couldn't make heads or tails of the character until she worked out what Jasmine's logic was. And once she understood Jasmine's logic, she could just argue Jasmine's logic. So that's what I want you guys to think about tonight. What message? What's the message of the story? What side of the argument are you on? How does that character justify their point of view? If you can justify their behavior, you can play any character. Because we all have our own justifications for why we behave in certain ways, don't we? Even when we know we're doing the wrong thing, we still justify it to ourselves. So understand the character's justification and argue that. If it's about an idea, if the story is about getting across some kind of idea or theme like we've been talking about, then our job as actors is to send ideas. Your job is to send the idea to the other person. Just like what I'm doing right now is I'm sending you guys ideas and hoping that they land.